is off on the current one, right? Yeah. So
Well, I've actually cut them both on. So I think I'm good, Greg.
okay, set up on this side. So
Say again.
let me get set up on this side.
Okay.
See, um, I'll shoot you a text just to let you know this.
Okay. I think that should be good though.
Okay.
All right, brother. Be good,
All
man.
right.
Yo.
Yes, sir.
Hi.
Okay. Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Morning. Hey, Dawn.
Hi, Allison.
How are you?
Well, how about you?
Oh, this
Good.
is wonderful. You know each other. This is great. Thank you both for not only responding, but responding fairly quickly. Really happy. You should know that Verna Orr is responsible for the three of us being together. I've done some work with Verna in the assessment space. In fact, she's actually a homegirl. She's from Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida. And she had been listening to the podcast, and there was one conversation where we talked about education, just on a tertiary level, and she thought that it would be good to have a conversation about education, as do I. In my day job, we're struggling to find students to educate and to get them through the education pipeline. And teachers are critical and necessary. And I know you guys do so much more than that, but having that conversation, she thought would be rich, and so do I. And it's even great to see sisters leading in that space. So really happy about that. Did you get the questions that I sent over?
Yes, the dissertation topics. Yes.
So look, I'm nervous around you education people, so I'm good with everybody else, but you people make me nervous. So, yeah, I got you, Allison. I see what you did there, and I'm cool with that. Dawn, I mean, you're not gonna help me out, make me feel a little better, and say, "Oh, they were good questions," or like,
Well,
uh,
there could be a podcast for each one of these questions.
Yes.
But that always guarantees a rich discussion.
Well,
Yeah.
I would just sit back and let you all talk. I can mute my screen out and do all that good stuff and let y'all do y'all thing. If I, 'cause I don't want to have a dissertation topics there, Ellen.
No. They really were very thought provoking, and like Dawn said, so much dirt that it could lead to several of
Yeah.
these conversations, because we're seeing it firsthand in our jobs.
Okay. Well, great. Do you guys want to? So here we'll go live here in a second. Actually, we're already live on YouTube, but we'll do an introduction, and then we'll edit this as well, and then we'll go into just some questions COVID related, and then we'll move from there wherever the conversation leads us. All right. So let me close this door, and then we'll get going. All right.
Dawn, I was so sad that our students couldn't get together in April.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had already had my team working on it. We were
I
looking for
know.
yeah. So we'll have to reschedule it another time.
For sure.
All right. If y'all ready, I'm ready. We Gucci?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Welcome to Four Thoughts of Our Founders, the podcast for the Higher Education Leadership Foundation. I'm Herman Felton, flying solo. My partners in crime, Dr. Alfred Anthony Pinkard, is working, doing what he's supposed to be doing. And my other partner, Dr. Melva Christie Williams, is also doing what she's supposed to be doing. Got a really special two guests here today. We're talking about education. We're talking about COVID-19. We're talking about the pandemic. We're talking about a lot of different things. I want you to welcome our special guest here today, Dean Allison Watson, College of Education, Florida A&M University, and the other dean, Dean Dawn Williams, the Dean of School of Education at Howard University. Welcome, leaders. How are y'all today?
Wonderful. Good morning.
Yes.
So what's dope about this conversation is that we have sisters who are leading at some pretty powerful institutions. Being a Floridian, I'm really proud that FAMU is represented up in the building, and the Mecca is here today as well.
Yes.
So we're really, really happy to have an engaging conversation, but one that really is a serious conversation. And today we're talking about the resurgence and the renewing of education at our HBCUs. Before we get started, I want you to introduce yourselves again and share one fun thing that you're doing during COVID that you didn't get a chance to do. And then we're going to get into some heavy stuff. So I'd like to start with you, Allison, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, first of all, Dr. Felton, thank you for having this conversation. It's definitely needed. And we see the likeness of that played out in our everyday lives on the news, with our communities and with the kids that we serve. So it's a delight and a pleasure to be here. I'm Allison Watson, Dean for the College of Education, as you said, at FAMU. the Hill. And just a little known fact about me, I am leading a wonderful group of rattlers, and I'm a proud rattler, but guess where I graduated from? Bethune-Cookman. So I'm a wildcat.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
But, you know, I have a walking group of ladies, and I would say we talk about this resurgence that you brought up every day. And when I'm not talking about the work that I do, I think a stress reliever is I got out on the grill yesterday and threw down on some ribs. And then I'm from DC originally, so Dawn is my sister from DC.
These connections.
Yes, and we had some blue crab, so we enjoyed ourselves.
Blue crabs. I love it.
Well, that's definitely something that we love over here, Allison. You know, on Sunday I did a seafood boil with crabs and shrimp. So that is something I don't normally get to do very often because it takes time for that low country boil to happen.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Dawn Williams. I am a professor and dean in the School of Education at Howard University. Very happy to be here. Thank you, Dr. Felton, again for this invitation to have this, what I know is going to be a rich conversation. One of the things that I have been very happy about during this shutdown, it has allowed me to slow down. So my calendar is always crazy, and it's filled with a lot of meetings and speaking engagements, etc. So it's really odd to see my calendar these days. So I do have the privilege of walking in my community almost daily with my 6-year-old. So we take our time and we discover things within nature. He is so inquisitive, and it's just really a good environment to see him like that, and to see him to be able to be free and just run. And getting out every day is a requirement because he needs to run every day.
Yeah.
Or else inside the household will be a little crazy.
I can certainly understand that. I want to also, just before we get started, underscore the fact that to our audience that these sisters are scholars and researchers, prolific, and they have earned doctorates as well. I'm just really comfortable, and I like first names, so I hope that you will call me Herman, and I hope that it does not diminish the respect that I have for the work that you've done in the space. I have to be really careful because I've been admonished about that by some people who, so I won't take the chance any further. So I want to get right into it. COVID-19, where were you when you realized that this was real? What do you remember a liminal moment that occurred where you said, okay, this is different and things are going to be different?
I think for me, it was being in Washington, D.C., we are close to Maryland, and we're also close to Virginia. So when the governor of Virginia made the announcement somewhat early March, maybe mid-March, that the schools were closing for the entire academic year, that's when we all said, whoa, you know, what's happening here? And even thought that that was a premature decision.
Yeah.
Of course, we know that all other localities followed suit shortly thereafter. So that's when I knew things were going to be different for us on a higher ed side because it's so closely related. Our K-12 school systems and how that impacts the students that we receive at the higher ed side. So when he made that decision, I knew that this was something that we had never, ever faced, and it was going to impact us in so many different ways of our lives.
Yeah. How about you?
Absolutely. For me, it was actually a personal doctor's appointment. I was new to Tallahassee and had a severe sinus infection, went to my doctor in late February. And he, you know, said, you know, you have a sinus infection, but I want to talk to you about something. And that is that COVID-19 is here. A lot of people are not talking about it, but it is very serious and it is going to get worse before it gets better. And he said, so I just want you to protect yourself, protect your family, you know, practice extra hygiene. And he gave me the warning. And then 2 weeks later, everything was out. He knew I was a researcher. He knew I was not a medical researcher or a scientist, but we talked about the implications for families, for the elderly. He knew that my mom was in the protected population that needed to be extra cautious. And so he alerted me. And then all of a sudden, of course, we have a developmental research school on our campus, and our superintendent met with me and he said, Dean, I can't allow our babies to be subjected to this. So I'm going to call my superintendent group and I'm thinking about closing school after spring break.
Wow.
And that was the start of the conversation. And then it all shifted from there.
So you're both running divisions with probably hundreds of employees. What was that like when you obviously conferred with the administration, leading your particular areas? How did that feel? Have either of you led through crises before? Was this shock to the central nervous system? Like, how was that? How was that in leading your particular schools through the closing and going online as well? How did that happen for you?
For me, I say I have led in definitely other areas of crisis, and I shared the parity with my fellow deans at FAMU. I said, I was hired for 6 weeks at USF as the dean when Hurricane Irma happened. And Hurricane Irma was so devastating to our student community and our families and some of our employees. And that was what I thought was the biggest crisis, that could happen in Florida, to have a major hurricane take everyone's power and electricity and water. And then at that time, my chancellor was fired. And so we had this whole shift in administrative duties. And I remember that being very significant in my growth as a leader, because it showed me that even though I know I have what I would call grace under fire, it showed me that I was ready if it happened again. And I think COVID-19 was the perfect example of that. My main thing and what my staff shared is that because you remain calm, we could remain calm. And I know Dawn and I, we don't know each other well, but I know her personality is also very caring and consoling. And so that is what my team looked to me to be. And then I love to communicate. And so I kept the team informed, the faculty informed. How is this going to play out for you? How does it look for your classes? And then worked alongside the provost. And so many of the things that were rolling out from academic affairs, we had already mapped out in the college as a plan. So I feel like grace under fire. And of course, I'm a strong believer in the Lord. So with that secret sauce, I think that we got through it and we're continuing to do so.
Yeah. And I feel that Allison hit it right on the nail. The term grace under fire is so appropriate. The faculty look at us as leaders, and if we're frantic, that's contagious. So we have to be measured thinkers and understand the nature of the crisis, but then also to be able to plan out how we're going to get through this. One thing that I think worked well for myself and the faculty in the School of Education was to remind them of how great they already were. Because they are educators, because they are trained well in assessment, because they're trained well in pedagogy. This was a shift on how we were to do things. And pretty much, even though the entire university was going online, that was a very new thing for us. Many of us in the School of Education had already done so. A pretty nice percentage had already either taught a class in a hybrid format or either taught a class totally online. So those colleagues got to emerge and talk about their experiences and talk about what some of the obstacles were and how we can get through it. And the university, of course, gave tons of training for the faculty to get there, but it was really just reminding them that the faculty within the university were looking at the School of Education to see, what did you all do? How can we get through this? And looking for us to model some of these actions and some of the curricula or the pedagogy styles that we put in place for going online. So we got through it, and we still have more to come. Right now, we are in our summer session 1, and it's totally online. So my faculty have more time to plan, of course, for the summer session, but we're still getting through it.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways, you guys, I would imagine, helped usher the way, a roadmap into how to get through the space. And I didn't think about how education would be leaders in that space, given that you were probably doing a lot of the things that the colleges were now getting ready to shift towards. We fortunately had a online we actually have an online degree program here at Wiley, and I'm so grateful that my predecessor thought it not robbery to look into the future before I got here, because had we not, I can tell you that it would have been chaotic, just a little tinge more chaotic. We're talking about education. We were on a previous podcast and we were talking about COVID-19, and we all, to a man and woman, shared the sentiment that getting people to go into education is really difficult now. Getting young men and young women, and I think particularly after COVID-19, once us parents and brothers and sisters see how much work teachers were actually doing, it might be even more difficult to get people to go into education. Why is education dying out and not so attractive for folks nowadays? And why are we seeing this closing of libraries, as I like to call it, at our HBCUs with respects to our education departments? Why do you think that is?
Mhm.
You know, education was the bread and butter for most institutions historically. I can remember at the 4 different institutions I've been at, education was the highest major, or put out some of the highest number of graduates.
Hmm.
And now we are in a social media fast money environment where a lot of our young people are being skewed in some of their choices, their passions. Many of the best teachers had a teacher that impacted their life.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what it all comes down to, and I say this at every orientation, no matter what school sector. How many of you can raise your hand and say, when you said you want to be a teacher, someone told you not to? And 100% of the class, or the 100% of the orientation sessions, hand go up. And I asked why. And they said, we need to make money to help support our family. And I say, I know what it's like to be poor. And I did not choose education the first time because I never wanted to be poor again. And that, having that conversation with students to say, I have never, once I made the decision to go into education, I have never looked back and said, this was a bad decision. It was the best decision I ever made. But I went into pre-med because I took one of those career assessments in high school, and it said I could be a teacher or I could be a doctor. So which one pays the 6-figure salary the fastest? And in my mind, knowing what it's like to not have running water, or knowing what it's like to struggle, I automatically went to the one that I knew I would not have to have that repeated cycle again. And that's what I find with a lot of our students, specifically, as you mentioned, Herman, the Black and brown. They have known what the struggle is like. So on a very granular level, besides talking about their passion, besides talking about their love for others and how they have helped nurture their nieces or nephews or cousins or siblings,
Hmm.
they think about what's the bottom line and what is my bottom dollar going to be
Yes.
with the career decision. And so as a dean and a passionate educator, everything that I do and say tells them to change that narrative. And I use this example all the time, and I have several, about a young lady that I nurtured as a mentor. And she got her degree in elementary education, but now works as a major trainer for American Airlines, making 6 figures, traveling the world prior to COVID-19, because she had a love for teaching and she could break down, as Dawn said, pedagogy, understanding how to break a subject matter down and teach others. So education, what I have been sharing, is far beyond the K-12 classroom. It's
Gotcha.
a gifting and an understanding of how to take material
Hmm.
and make it very easy for someone else to understand.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Allison. Those are great examples. And I think what we have to do with our young people is to become myth busters in what going into the field of education looks like. And there are several examples, like Allison cited, of the career of education is so expansive.
Hmm.
Our young people don't consider teaching because we don't put it in front of them. They see it because they're being taught. But when we have a career day, as an example, at a school, how many times is the career that is featured, the speaker that is featured, an educator? And so
Oh my
there
God.
is a missed opportunity
Yeah.
to expose the field of education to children while they're young. There are several high schools that have career academies, and thankfully, many of those career academies are also educator and teacher academies that can provide a pipeline into study and education, and even working with those young people. And it is a myth buster. So we're fortunate enough to be in Washington, D.C., where it's the highest paid district within the United States. They can come out of 4 years and make $63,000 or $64,000 with no experience.
A lot of money.
They don't normally know that. We
Yeah.
have to tell them that. And then we tell them the multiple pathways that one can take, but it has to start as a teacher.
Yeah.
If you have that foundation as a teacher, there's so many ways that you can go. Now, we don't want to take them out of the profession, because we definitely need qualified and effective teachers.
Yeah.
And when they come to our schools of education, they fall in love with the prospect of teaching. We put them in front of children very early,
Mhm.
so they can see, and they so early and often, so they can see what it means to be a teacher in a variety of settings. So I think there's hope for us to be able to relate further
Yeah.
to our young people, and especially as it relates to COVID-19. And I'm talking with a number of superintendents just last weekend, and we were just talking about we have the attention of the American public right now. All those parents that are at home teaching their young children and not so young children
Yeah.
are finally really getting to see how much work it takes to be a good teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have been writing apology notes. They have been on social media saying, "I'm so sorry," saying how much they appreciate their teachers,
Yeah.
of the children. And so if we are going to advocate for there to be a change in the teaching profession, for there to be higher respect, for there to be higher pay, this is the absolute time to do it.
I agree. What I take away from this globally, not at FAM or at Howard, but it's really our fault that we've not kept to the forefront the importance of teaching. I think it's also our fault that we've not invested globally again in education, because as you said, Allison, I know once I got into the history of Edward Waters College, I know all the teachers in Duval County primarily went to Edward Waters, and then they went to FAMU to get their teaching certificate back in the 50s and 60s, et cetera. And you know, a lot of places, our Black colleges do phenomenal work with respects to filling the void and the gap for teaching. How do we reimagine, or can you tell me, first of all, what's important for a school of education to be a thriving apparatus? What should be present at an institution for you to have a thriving school of education?
Mhm. I think for us, it's the relatability. And let me say that I'm also a proud HBCU advocate, but then graduate as well of North Carolina A&T from their school of education. So the foundation of what I saw coming up really helped to lay the ground for what I knew needed to happen in a school of education, particularly at an HBCU. But one,
So you were learning then, unbeknownst to you, what it meant to have a solid school of education.
that's right. Not, of course, not even thinking that I was going to become a dean of a school of education. But I have to say that the way that the faculty nurtured the students, and the way that I can tell that the faculty got along with each other to work collaboratively with us, what were great models for me to see what was needed. when having a strong school of education, particularly within the community. And Allison, I know as well, FAM really does a great job with working with the children within the community, which is so important. So going back to what's needed, the relatability. I tell people all the time that Howard University is not just in the community, we are of the community. So we do a number of programs throughout the year, particularly more so in the summer, but really throughout the whole academic year to work with children. It's one of the things that I introduced when I became the dean was to at least host one faculty meeting a year in the school building. I have faculty of varying ages and varying expertise. Of course, we are a comprehensive school of education, but I wanted them to know what it felt like to go through a metal detector, to come to work every day. This is what our pre-service teachers had to do. This is what our children have to do. I wanted our faculty to know that this is something that has to happen every day. So in having those faculty meetings, we also were able to talk with educators today to say, what are some of the trends that you're seeing? We want to make sure that what we're teaching in the School of Education is absolutely transferable to the environment that we know that our students are about to be professionals in. So the relatability, we do a very good job of being culturally responsive. People come to us to learn more about doing that. But it serves the community so well when you have a teacher who knows how to relate to the students in their classrooms.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I agree with Dawn wholeheartedly. I think when I think of education thriving, from today and beyond COVID-19, the word that comes to mind and has for, I would say, the last decade of my career is innovation. We have to be extremely innovative. And what I share with the faculty is similar to what Dawn shared. We are the ones that created the whole teaching pathway. We are the ones that develop engineers and doctors and lawyers, and artists and librarians. And so we have to be the first at the table to be innovators. And I really like some of the topics that you shared, Herman, with us about STEM, because when Dawn shared about Career Day and have never really having teachers for career, that's so true. But one of the ways that I've been able to pivot in the College of Education is to be able to share with the faculty, the staff, and then our constituents and our stakeholders that we are innovators. And that comes through STEM education and pathways that lead far beyond what we're doing in the K-12 classroom, but help us teach the students in K-12 to be the leaders of tomorrow. And it's not really a cliche. It's, if I'm training you as a teacher, and I know that this is what you're going to face in K-12, then you have to know how to code. You have to know how to gain and captivate your students' attention, because all through COVID-19, we're seeing a huge line in the sand for the haves and the have-nots.
Absolutely.
We're seeing a huge line in the sand for the students that have been capable of being able to thrive, and those that don't even have the bare necessities to really function every day. And so for education to thrive, we need to be, it's hard to say, but all things to all people, at least know how to meet those needs.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an urban educator, how are you innovative as an urban educator? If you're going to be a rural educator, what are you going to bring to the table for students that have disparities? And if you're going to be in the suburbs, how are you going to engage the parents that are helicopter-like and want to make sure that you know what you're doing? And as a HBCU, we are called to the carpet even more, because everyone's so critical of us and what we put out, and putting out excellence, but we have to underscore that excellence with even more of an innovative stance. And so that's how we've been able to pivot at FAMU, and we'll continue to post COVID-19.
You know, I when I think about my childhood and growing up in Duval County and in the inner city, the one thing that I did not know was that we were poor. And unfortunately, kids now see the disparities. And to be more granular, I did not recognize the disparities between the have and have nots. I think COVID-19 has destroyed that, for that innocence, and that safety net for most of our kids now, because it is glaring that education is a digital highway. And if the medium income for the household is 20K or below, the need for Wi-Fi and broadband is even more critical now. And knowing that you don't have it, I think makes for the first entree into recognizing the disparities, if you will. Both of you have talked about some great things in your comments, but I'd like to know if there is, or what role does, I know we have a responsibility, and it seems even greater at HBCUs because of who we are. And I always tell people it's an honor because we are historic. And when haters come and people come and detractors, it should be understandable to us. We matter because we are historic in nature, and there is nothing else like us. No MSI, no TCU, none of that. Whatever all those acronyms mean, there will never be anything like our schools. We're historic. Deal with it, right? In that, the question for me is what role does the public sector play in helping? We talked about innovation and we talked about our responsibilities. What role does the public sector play in education, be it K-12 or higher ed? I'd rather focus on K-12 now, though, and because you are producing those who go out in that space, what do you think the role for the private sector is in helping us get back to our dominance as a nation?
Well, we had an example of that. We were very fortunate to be a part of the FedEx boardroom experience. And as you know, FedEx is a public company that is responsible for shipping all across the entire globe. And they chose our counselor education students to come and do a boardroom experience because FAMU is historic and they wanted to be in an education space, but really focus on the boardroom performance indicators and how counselor educators play a role in that. When these are senior levels, right under the CEO leaders that came and spoke to our students. And when they heard the depth and the richness that came from our graduate counselor education students, they said enough people don't know what is here in this room at Florida A&M, what is here in Tallahassee, what is in DC at Howard University. So I have seen where we have to be our own publicist. We have to say, we invite you to come or we'll come to you. Because a lot of the public is not sharing how good we are. I had a conversation this morning and one of our intern supervisors said, I have never had an intern from FAMU, but now that I have, I can say bar none, they are the top that I've ever seen. That perception, we're historic, we know how great we are.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the public perception
That's not
puts us in a light of one little headline that made the local news or one offbeat incident that happened near campus but wasn't on campus. And that's the perception that they give about us. And so I really love what Dawn said about myth busting. We're having to myth bust in our own, not only for our career and our trajectory, but we're having to myth bust for the public perception in many ways. And I find it's even more interesting, and I share this with the faculty, I say, nationwide, you all are so respected. Florida A&M is known nationwide. The alumni base is super strong. In our own backyard, we have to work on it.
Yeah.
Because in Leon County, we're in the shadows of a great PWI that they often don't even, oh yeah, there's FSU, and then there's FAMU. And it's not to take any light from FSU, but it does in many ways marginalize us in our own community. And so I share with them often, a prophet is not respected in his own land. So in order for us to be respected, we have to show them what we're doing. Out of the institutions in this region, we just received 100% CAPE accreditation, national accreditation. And so that shows this region, when we put the press release out, hey, Leon County, hey, Tallahassee, capital of Florida, we're here, we're historic, and we're continuing to make historic trends. That is what is going to shape the public perception. And also it's really key for leaders like Dawn and I to have these meetings with executives, not only in the K-12 arena and the higher ed arena, but business leaders, Chamber of Commerce, and say, this is how we're here, and this is how we're going to shift the economic impact by being here. I often meet with public community leaders to tell them about the number of beds that are predicated in the prison system based on the reading scores. Yeah. And that's a narrative that we know we could repeat, we could talk about who wrote it when, but that narrative is not something that public constituents often know.
Yeah.
And if they do, they don't want to talk about it. And
or
so
weaponize it.
Yes, exactly. And I know you talked about K-12, but it goes broad, and then it comes back to how it impacts K-12.
Yeah. Dawn, what's the apathy of foundations and corporations in terms of funding towards research for education and just supporting education as a whole? Do you get a sense that there's good apathy towards those of us in the School of Education?
Well, it's mixed. And my response to the private industry was going to be one of investment and opportunity. So as you're asking this question around investment, it's mixed. There have been several, particularly in Washington, D.C. region, several alternative preparation programs that lead to teacher licensure or someone to become a teacher. And it competes with the spaces of traditional education that you will find at schools and colleges of education. So going back to how that relates to the private industry has many times invested into these alternative preparation programs, more so sometimes than what we offer in a traditional sense. But that traditional sense at an HBCU often looks different than some of our PWI counterparts. I think the alternative preparation programs, it's not one size fits all. There are some that are great. There are some that are not so great. However, they have a very strong narrative, and their narrative generally is about, we can do it better. We can produce more. We can fill the needs within the urban school communities. And I say urban school communities because that's where they are. They're largely not in the suburban communities. So
do those alternative programs also steer us to the technical training, technical preparedness, as opposed to getting prepared for professional and liberal arts educations and careers?
Oh, not necessarily. So I'm using the word alternative preparation program different than how most people know of alternative. Most people know of alternative just the way that you're speaking, more career and technical education as opposed to a college preparatory. That's in the K-12 sector. But in the higher education space, is generally people who have graduated with a degree in a non-education major that will be converted into becoming teachers. And the most extreme example I can give is that someone who may have graduated with a sociology or political science degree, as an example, will spend 6 weeks to train to become a teacher and then be placed in the classrooms in the schools with the highest need, with the greatest gaps in achievement. So the part that I think we need to pay attention to is how the private industry continues to invest in these programs, but not in the programs that Allison and I are running. As an example, as we have been awarded CAPE accreditation, same as FAMU has been awarded CAPE accreditation, we had to go through a very rigorous process to say that we are doing well. We are producing graduates that are doing well. But
that's like a SACS process.
to get the funding.
That's like a SACS process within a SACS process, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
And not for nothing, if I could just add to what Dawn said,
Sure,
the program that she is referring to, not only do they recruit like another major to be a teacher, they also pay them an added supplement and give them reduced housing with, in many cases, a partnership with the local PWI to earn a master's degree in 2 years. And so you're talking about us trying to fill our seats in our noble profession with the best and the brightest when their friends are like, well, hey, I just got this job. I'm doing this, I'm making this amount, and my master's is getting paid for. And I just saw one of the young ladies I've known since she was little went through this program and posted, oh, you guys, my 2 years is up, COVID-19, I wish you the best, I'm going to law school now. And that's the narrative that often happens with those programs.
So true.
You know, we've never been accused of not being able to manipulate a system for our good, though, right? Like, and that's part of the ingenuity, and leads me to the question about us being able to produce entrepreneurs from our education programs. I know there's a need for that. Every time you walk across a campus and you know, at least for me, I engage in some students, and invariably, when I ask what's next, it's, you know, I'm gonna open up my own business. Well, how you gonna do that? And everybody has this tinge to, you know, get in and go their own way. How do we, with the meager resources that we have, faced with all the other challenges that we're grappling with, how do we also ensure that we're producing students with entrepreneurial spirits and even producing the next wave of entrepreneurs?
I think some of that is curriculum based, but some of it is also philosophically based, where we have to encourage them to say that you can do this. We have to give them the confidence and help to instill the courage for them to go after it. We have to be also more interdisciplinarian. So if you are an education major, there has to be flexibility for you to take a class in marketing, take a class in accounting. So that those are structures that we can put in place. At Howard, we do have our Entrepreneurial Institute where students from a variety of majors can major in. Because we are strong believers that we are the answer to the problems that we see. But that is also a huge component. We have to help them to see the problems.
Yeah.
So once they're able to see the problem, they can envision a solution. And that will help to fuel that entrepreneurial spirit. But so there are structures that we have to put in place, but again, the structures can be there, but if the philosophy of telling these bright students that you can do it, you have our support. This is what you can reference to get to where you need to be. That also has to be in place for us to be able to create more entrepreneurs in our community.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that, Dawn. Very same frame of thought. Remember, I talked about innovation as the space for us to pivot. So we're developing a degree that is doing exactly what Dawn said. It's an education innovation degree that basically shares an interdisciplinary space where the students will be able to take classes in business to learn marketing strategy and technique, enhance their entrepreneurship, but also have the pedagogical foundation that they can be successful in any teaching workspace. Because we know that our students have hugely creative ideas, but having them hone into how to craft them and make them successful is what we intend to do. I recently had a conversation with one of our alumni. She put on an Instagram Live founded her own business. It's called Teacher Bay Incorporated, Teacher BAE, and
Mhm.
Bay is balanced and educated. And she's been teaching for 10 years, but she put together this teacher empowerment space that basically teachers from all over the country are proud of not only being a teacher, but flex in it in this Teacher Bay group. And it's for, of course, men and women, but it's all about encouraging future educators and current educators in their space. She received her master's. She's pushing them, hey, if you haven't thought about your master's, get it. And that innovative space is taking what she learned in the classroom in a traditional sense and then putting it into an entrepreneurial vision it's been very successful.
I don't want to brag or suggest that we've cornered the market on encouragement, the way we motivate folks. I want to take a break here and just give you an opportunity to talk about that one moment or one moment in particular that happened on the campus of Bethune-Cookman or North Carolina A&T from one of your professors that really moved you in a way that that you still remember today. And I'll give you a minute to think. I'll just what you said when you talked about encouragement, Dawn, made me think about Easy Ogueri, one of my political science professors at Edward Waters College. He taught at Edward Waters for free. He's Nigerian, but he was a distinguished professor at UNF, which was right across the city. And unbeknownst to me, he had us taking exams. If it was 3 hours, we had no extra credit, we had no quizzes, we wrote for 3 hours. If it was a 4 hour, we did the same thing. But there was never, and it was always, there was never a, assignment before the final exam. There was never a quiz. And he prepared me for law school. I had no idea. When I got to law school and found out we only take one exam, I was like, what's the problem? And people around me were falling all over the place. Like, we only get one exam. There's no quizzes, no this, no that. And he was preparing me. And so he said to me before we left that if I didn't stretch you, you wouldn't know your flexibility. And I'll never forget that because it was much more about being flexible. It was about having the dexterity to understand that if I am not pushed, and being pushed looks different in a lot of from it depends on who it comes from, right? Some parents will never tell you they love you, but they feed you, they clothe you, they house you, but he wasn't that verbose individual. He gave us the little nuggets here and there. But I remember him, and he is with me everywhere I go. And his standard was excellence, and there was no two ways about it. After that writing, the paper was marked with red. That's why I'm still a little skittish, with he intentionally had a red marker. But it made for a better writing when I got to law school. So, do you guys have any persons that really touched you while you were trying to find your way in undergrad?
Mhm, mhm. Well, oddly enough, the person that I can think of right now is the dean of the School of Education when I was at A&T. And many people can't say that they know their dean. I did.
Mhm.
And I love that we had a personable relationship in that way. I remember my family had fell on hard times. It was my junior year, and I wasn't sure if we were going to have any tuition to cover it. I'm from New York, Queens, New York. So A&T being a public university, most of the scholarships were for students of the state of North Carolina.
Mhm.
So there were, and I was a high achiever, but there was nothing for me, at least I thought. So I talked to my dean, and she said, I have something I think will work for you. And it was the vending machine scholarship. Who knew? So when people lost money in the vending machine, they collected it and created an endowed scholarship from it.
Are
And
you
I
serious?
to get a vending machine scholarship. At least that's what she told me. So that helped to save me and to continue my education. And then she's also the one who recommended me personally to go through a program called SROP, which is part of the Big Ten, a summer research opportunities program for students at the Big Ten universities. And so I did that at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and it exposed me to graduate school, which really was not on my radar. My thing was, I'm going to become a teacher. And I was totally happy with that.
Yeah.
So I ended up, after that program was over, being equipped to know what to do to apply to graduate school. And I applied to several and ended up enrolling in the University of Illinois. But that was solely because of the recommendation of the Dean of the School of Education, Dr. Dorothy Barnett, at A&T during my undergrad time.
That's amazing. So I have always been a little bit stubborn, and I just this woman is always just so fresh in my mind because she has made such an impact on my life. She's still at Bethune-Cookman. Her name is Dr. Joan Thompson. But I work for her. So Lawton Childs received huge grant funding through the Challenger program because we know what happened at the Space Center with the Challenger. And so the Challenger program had implications for first generation college students. And I received the Challenger scholarship, and I worked in what I call her as Aunt Joan's office. And she would have me craft letters to Governor Childs on her behalf. So she'd say, I need this letter. I need it to say this, this, and this. And I would take my time and write the letter with what I thought was my high cotton DC education. And she would tear it up and say, you're fired. And she would fire me every day. She said, you are fired every day until you get something right. And so I was fired every single day. And she coined that term long before the person we thought coined it. She would fire me. And so one day I was sitting in the cafeteria, and I was a pre-med major, and she just was tired of me going to these science classes and not seeing a fire that she thought I should have. And so she took her finger and pointed it in my chest really hard. And she was like, you are not following your passion. You are an educator, and that is what you need to be. And I need you to go change your major. And I said to her, I will never make any money as an educator. She said, you don't have to worry about the money. You follow your passion, because this being a doctor is nice, but it's not you. And we went toe to toe so many times in my life, but that was a very critical moment for me, because she said, Allie, I've never had to worry about money. I've sent many, many kids to college, and I love being an educator, and that's what you are. And that was a pivotal moment. It changed my life, and I'm just glad she's here today to see it come to fruition. She never told me she was proud of me until I became the dean of FAMU. And I had other positions all over the country. And
Didn't matter.
She called me when I got the job. Allie, I said, yes, Aunt Joan. She said, I'm proud of you. That was the first, I didn't even know she knew those words. That was the first time.
Well, you know, what's refreshing about this is that most of us that have traversed the campuses of an HBCU have stories like this. Dawn talked about toolbox and tools in the toolbox. What tools should students first receive from their institutions? And what should they have themselves if they're going out into the world to be educators?
That's a good question.
My work is done here.
Yes.
If I've got both of you to think and pause for a second, and it was a good question, I'm done. I'm good.
Well, it's because, you know, when you think about tools, you think about long-lasting things that will stay with you from the time you're a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman that steps on the foot of the campus, to the time that you're a 20 or 21-year-old graduate, to the time that you're then 30 years old, and to now be 40 and heavily in the profession. And the tools that I say stuck with me was the first was integrity. I learned integrity from my upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
but it was crafted even more from my college experience in the College of Education, because it was at Bethune-Cookman that when things would get tough and the professors would assign these portfolios that I thought was dumb, my fellow peers thought was dumb, but we had the integrity to do it on our own, and to do it with excellence. And so then when we showed up 5 years later in the profession, and the principal said these were the most well-written lesson plans, or this was the most well-done team meeting that I've ever experienced, then we could rely on that integrity that carried us through, tenacity, the tenacity to not give up, to know that when you're teaching amongst peers that may be jealous of you or have never heard of your institution. I moved to a state where no one had heard of Bethune-Cookman.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to have that tenacity to say, but I'm here for the students, and you'll learn about Mary McLeod Bethune, and you'll learn about Bethune-Cookman. But right now, my number one thing is to be tenacious,
Yeah.
and to push through for my students that are at the 17th percentile in the reading level, and get them to the 70th in one academic year. So integrity, tenacity, and character, those are things that I just see when I see my professor like Dr. Rufus Ellis. I love him. He is a quintessential HBCU professor at FAMU. And he calls everyone by their last name and says, when you come to this classroom, you're a scholar. And that's my only expectation of you. If you don't come acting as a scholar, then you will be asked to leave.
Mm-hmm.
That builds your character. And so I would say integrity, tenacity, and character are tools that will stay with you from the time you're a freshman to the time you delve into your career.
Those are really good, Allison.
Yeah.
And as I think about our students right now who are studying to become teachers, and not just teachers, just the whole gamut within the education profession, the leaders, the counselors and the psychologists and the assessment folk, is empathy. So that goes both ways. For a person who's empathetic, when you are an educator, there are a number of stories that keep you up at night.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of stories that 20 years from now you still remember.
Yeah.
It is important for educators to be empathetic and to understand their perspectives, even if they don't agree with all of them, but to understand their perspectives. Those perspectives and those lived experiences are going to help you to relate better to your students and the communities that you serve. And empathy from a perspective, about a year ago, I was given a talk on the anniversary of Bowling versus Sharp within the Brown versus Board of Education. And I talked about how equity means different things to different people.
Right.
And for us, we know what it means in our HBCU spaces, in our spaces where there are predominantly people of color. We are looking to get resources to us that we know are going to help us to excel. And those resources may be different than resources that other people may get, who have who are starting on a level set ground. But equity to other communities could be perceived as a threat, because in order to make something equitable, that may mean taking away from what I have to give more to folks
someone else
there.
Yeah.
So teaching our students to be empathetic, to understand, if you understand from that perspective, then you can advocate differently, to be able to share why it's important that we make this move towards equity, and why it's important for the populace, for the people. There's a poem that I often read to our graduating students called "Other People's Children," written by Lillian Katz, who's an early childhood educator. But she talks about how it's so important for us to take care of other people's children, because it's other people's children who will run this country, who will contribute to this world.
Mm-hmm.
So empathy really takes us into the space to be able to take care of our children and other people's children.
People call those things that you've mentioned soft skills. Some folks call them critical skills. I couldn't agree more that those are probably the um, greater attributes, skills, tools that people can have. In fact, it is the beginning of every conversation. It dictates how people engage with each other. If there is a lack of those tools, then things can go bad really quickly. And when people understand that, let's just be honest, Black and brown kids are oftentimes dismissed because people don't understand them. And oftentimes they're dismissed, and that understanding comes from people not understanding how kids move, and then kids not understanding how important it is for people to understand, or to understand how they project themselves. And if kids don't understand how they show up in places, it makes for a rocky start for encounters, even on my campus, to be quite honest with you. But I think I have a really good understanding of, who our kids are, and I don't judge kids with baggy pants and dreads or locks and the things that find them in the crosshairs of others who may not necessarily understand them. So I echo your sentiments that those things are really, really important. What is, as we shift gears here and cut across the field, what does education look like for the older population? Adult and evening education. That's a huge segment or swath of folk who life happened to them and they stopped out and began to take care of families, and then they're realizing that they're finding impediments because they don't have, degrees or formal educations. What does that look like moving into post-COVID? Do you imagine that people are recognizing that they're deficient in those areas even more? And what is that going to look like for us as a nation and our schools?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the post COVID is very important conversation now as we talk about a generation of people who are receiving education and those who are delivering education.
Hmm.
What education looks like now, the traditional is moving to a virtual space, and it wasn't an easy shift by all means for both parties, for those who were the educators as well as those who were the students. But I do think that we are preparing our students to, when they graduate this spring, they may likely enter into a school system that is doing virtual learning. So, a conversation that we had to have with our graduating teachers, our students who were completing their student teaching, and they had to shift into an online environment within the last 2 months of this school district period or school period.
Hmm.
It was a new skill set for them. So we had to kind of say, okay, you're not going to be able to do what you were doing before of working with the students in a way that you were trained to work with them. But let's look at the silver lining here. You're now being taught a skill set of how to connect with students and how to teach in a virtual way, because this is something that you may have to do upon graduation.
Hmm.
And if our schools open back up in the fall and part of it is virtual, or even if all of it is virtual, I'm grateful that our students are now have that skill set to be able to still help to impart knowledge in the virtual way. But there are so many ways that it could be done. So I think there folks are struggling right now to figure it out. And we're not even talking about the access part. I'm
Hmm.
talking about the technical part of imparting the education and receiving an education and how that looks different. And even the fatigue of being behind a computer for hours a day.
I don't think people are giving a lot of credence to the fatigue, that piece.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah.
No.
You
exactly.
feel it,
I
I
do.
feel like there have been more virtual meetings than pre-COVID than the meetings that I had in person. Now everyone wants to jump on Microsoft Teams and Zoom now for everything.
Exactly.
Email. But so it definitely has increased our time behind the computer, and there's going to be some research that's going to come out of this around social and emotional learning that's connected to being behind a device. I guarantee it.
Absolutely. No, I agree
That is so
completely.
true.
I kind of feel like I'm working more now than I did pre-COVID.
Right.
Yes.
With the meetings.
Yes.
Yeah. And so yeah. I'm sorry, Allison, go ahead. I didn't
So
want to go off on a soapbox.
no, it's true, because I honestly, when I asked my assistant to help me with the Monday schedule, he had to remind me that we were off because it's Memorial Day. And I was like, you're right. I didn't know that.
Me too. I'm guilty of that. They all feel the same, right?
Yes.
It's like Groundhog's Day. Wake up every day.
Yes.
And it doesn't help me that I try to create some sense of normalcy through COVID. I've been at work every day, and my
Yeah.
house is right next door to my office. Like 60 seconds, I'm in my office building in my chair. And so they all feel the same. I wake up, work out, eat breakfast, look for lunch. After lunch, to look for dinner and start over every day.
Yes.
So I apologize to you as well, both of you,
No.
for sending out a request to podcast on Memorial Day.
Oh, I was so, when he told me, I was so embarrassed that I didn't know, because I didn't take any of the meetings off the schedule. And so anyway, I told them don't open their computer yesterday.
Yeah.
But I would say for this question, Herman, I have a firsthand experience. So my mom integrated the Pentagon. My mom was a first generation college student at Morgan State.
Oh, wow.
She dropped out because the government came looking for high quality candidates to integrate. And she integrated she worked for a 4-star general in the Pentagon, one of the first African American to take that position. And she never went back to college until I was in 8th grade. And then I got stricken with pneumonia and she had to drop out. She was at University of Virginia. So my mom now is 73 years old and she is in a 100% online bachelor's program.
Wow.
And she literally was not going to come to my barbecue yesterday because she was writing a paper. But she shows me what it's going to be like for adults in education. She's 73, very smart, very articulate, loves to write. Her papers in her bachelor's program can put my PhD papers to shame any day. I tell her that. But just seeing how she has navigated gives me the promise and the hope that it can be done. On the opposite side of the coin, I have a faculty member who, when we rolled out that all of our classes would be online, this faculty member is an expert in health and human performance, said, you know what, Dean, here's my resignation.
I'm done.
I cannot articulate how to change my teaching platform to not be face-to-face for health and human performance. And even when I said to him, here's some ways it can be done, he said, I've been in this career for 32 years and that's so opposite what I've done. I can't do it. And so I see that we have gaps in different sectors of our age population. If there is a desire, there is a will, there is a way. We as educators have to demystify the hard challenges around online teaching and learning and make it much more feasible and people-centered and intuitive. The reason that people of a certain generation like Apple phones is because they're intuitive. I don't like them personally, but my mom does, other generations. We have to make learning more intuitive for the learner so that then it takes some of their challenges out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing feedback. I don't know if you are.
I'm not. Are you?
A little bit.
Okay.
The older adult, I believe, or the seasoned learner, rather, I think in a lot of ways, when we talk about the resurgence of education and the renewal, I think they're going to be the drivers in education and the way we educate and the intuitiveness that they force us to learn or to master. I think will be extremely beneficial for both the learner and the teacher. I just feel like there's so much wisdom in those libraries, anyway. And I learn a ton from people who are senior to me in every experience, really at every avenue that is intriguing to me. How do we stand globally as a nation that educates folks? And are there any models, educational models around the world that the greatest nation ever built, or one of the, because that first one was Africa. And I know that's a continent and all that good stuff, but I just want to be clear that America isn't. How do we extrapolate pieces of some models that you might think personally are really good, and bring over to what we do here and make us even better?
Well, this is a tough question because education is done differently across the world, particularly with. Oh, yeah, I'm getting some feedback as well. So hopefully, I'll make this response short. One area that I've been looking into, one area that avenue that we're about to go down at Howard University is with Montessori education. It's not new. It is all over the world. Started by Maria Montessori, educator. The style of education for Montessori is very child centered. It looks different than the way that we train teachers to work with children in a traditional sense. I'm learning more and more about it, being more and more impressed about the type of student that is a product of a Montessori education. They are independent earlier. They are creative thinkers. They are greater self-assurance. So this is again probably some more of those soft skills there, but they're taught a bit differently. So we're looking to offer a Montessori teacher training program at Howard University. So even when we talk about, and even as we teach about Afrocentric ways of working with children, the parallels Afrocentric education and Montessori education are strong. So it's something I feel good about getting behind as a model of education. So this is going to be a very interesting study for us from a research standpoint as well, because we still are going to maintain our traditional teacher training program and then introducing this Montessori program. And I'm very interested to see the product that we create from both programs when we compare them on similar characteristics.
That's phenomenal. I love that, Dawn. I went through Montessori education, and when I worked at Northeastern State University, our early childhood program was completely built around Montessori education research. And we had an award-winning NACE early childhood program for that. So that's kudos to you. I think probably all three of us have been to many of the Caribbean developing areas. I have done a lot of work with kids. Um, and I've noticed the level of knowledge that the students um, take away is often through rote memorization. But I also know with their skill set, they hone and craft what they've learned in a rote memorization format that is not normally used in the U.S. and decide what skill set they're going to come up with from that rote memorization. So if I know this, and this, then my end result will be this as a career. And I think from a global perspective, I want our teacher candidates to know what what makes Finland so great? What is Afrocentric education? What is happening in the Caribbean with our African brothers and sisters? Um, and I want them to have a global perspective. And one of the key goals that I lined out for this year within the College of Education is that we will be globally minded and globally centered. We're not just teaching in Florida, we're not just teaching in DC, we're not just teaching in Texas. We need to know how the world works and how that influences education. I love Dawn's perspective from Montessori because that is a theory of excellence that is actually proven to be results oriented in the students that graduate. So we haven't adopted anything yet at FAMU other than the fact that we're working with our Office of International Studies to provide more impactful ways to do education through a globally centered approach.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still looking for some things to adopt, but right now it's getting them to think from a small, finite perspective
Mm-hmm.
to a much more global perspective.
As we cut across the field, one of my major takeaways from this conversation is the assurance that Howard and FAMU are being led by some phenomenal leaders who are empathetic, kind, and brilliant. And I'm certain that it doesn't. Excellence is the only standard that you accept, the only form of currency that you accept. And I'm really happy about that. I really am, and I also want to underscore the fact that you are not anomalies in this space. You are, part and parcel what we have at our HBCUs. And I hope that there are far more women leading these divisions, these, programs than there are men. And I know that the bubbling up of leadership looks like a whole bunch of bubbles bursting, and women will be leading not just HBCUs, but all across America. I know that our HBCUs are beginning to understand the importance of having sisters lead. So I'm really happy about that. I want to ask you in closing, what do we need to do at HBCUs to, again, I want to return to this question, to ensure that education has a really bright future and that we're attractive to students. I was having dinner just yesterday, with a young lady and one of my former students from Livingstone when I worked at Livingstone, and she went to a PWI and was recruited by Texas Southern, and she knew she wanted to be a dentist. And she went, and she's also a student athlete. So she was recruited, and she made her decision based on the education programs and the education that she would receive. And she noted that one school had more resources than the other, but we were sitting, Hillman and I, and and my wife, we were talking about the HBCU experience. And she lamented that she wished that things were equal and she would have had the capacity to choose the HBCU experience over the one that she had. What do we need to do? And you talked about this a little bit, Allison, about, making sure that people regionally in our backgrounds, in our backyards, understand how powerful we are and how great we are. Um, how do we crush that myth, and what do we do to equip ourselves with the appearance of being equal to other spaces? And actually, I think I'd add being more than, because of the special sauce that you get at our institutions.
We have to be disruptive innovators. We have to say, this is what you think is the norm. This is what you've set as the bar,
Hmm.
but we're going to bust that wide open and going to show you that this is how we're changing spaces for America, for the nation, for the globe, through our educational pathway. We have to get that in our young people. And I can say that I believe COVID-19 is going to push us into that realm. People like the three of us, we disrupt all the time in terms of making innovation happen for our folks, for the people that are in our close team. They might be thinking one way and it's nice and it's good, but we're mixing it up and say, let's paint a whole picture. Let's push to another trajectory that even maybe you didn't see for ourselves. I think that's what we have to do for this generation. Help. Thinking outside the box is not even enough. Think outside the box and build the next one to be so dynamic that it changes the legacy of your life and the lives that come behind you. That's what disruptive innovators do. And that's what we have now more than ever. Now more than ever, like Dawn said in the beginning, educators, parents, everyone is seeing us like, you know what, they're doing their dang thing when they get in that classroom. We're sitting here with our kids and we don't know what we're doing, but we thank these teachers. Now more than ever, people are looking at educators to say, what is this educational space going to look like? What is our capacity to do more? And we have to continue to push that narrative and be disruptive innovators and put that in this generation. So that they can do the same.
Thank you.
I love that term, disruptive innovators.
Me too. I already wrote it down too. So.
That really does describe us in our work.
Yeah.
But you know, I think we have come to a point where HBCUs are becoming more and more visible. I think back on my rearing and seeing a different world on TV and just saw how positive of a show that was. The fictitious Hillman College, really, every HBCU was really convinced me to go to an HBCU. As I said before, I grew up in New York City. There are no HBCUs in the state of New York, so I deliberately applied to HBCUs and give a lot of credit to what was happening in popular culture. But now let's look at Blackish, This Is Us, Beyonce's Homecoming.
Yeah.
So HBCUs are being put on a high platform. My husband's a graduate of a PWI, but you know, he's at Howard all the time now. And tells me if I had just went on one college tour,
it would have been over.
at an HBCU, it would have been different. Yeah. So, and I truly believe that. And I have my niece here who's 17, who's being quarantined with us during this time when her school is closed. And I asked her repeatedly, so what's on your list of schools? And they're all HBCUs. She has been convinced, probably because of her auntie, that HBCU is where she needs to go. And yesterday I shared with her something I read on social media, and I'm going to read it to you all. And unfortunately, I don't know, the person's name is Maze, who wrote this, but she said, someone tried to talk me out of attending an HBCU by citing that it's more important to be around diversity and interact with people who don't think and look the way you do. And she replied, child, I got all my life to be the minority. Out of my way and let me enjoy what my ancestors built for me.
Watch out now.
Absolutely. Love that. I could not stop saying amen to that, because it did something for me and my colleagues of attending an HBCU. And you know, we say things like we brag differently. Mm-hmm. Herman, I love that question where you were asking what was that pivotal moment. We could have named several.
Yeah.
Such an affirming space. So I recently wrote a piece that talked about going from cultural responsiveness to cultural affirmations. And that is what HBCUs do. They affirm our culture and they give you that confidence. You know, when we talk about even that entrepreneurial spirit, it's really about people believing that you can do it. You can be the innovator and the problem solver. So all of that is what HBCUs are. And I think the public is getting snippets of that popular culture, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But from a research perspective, we need to showcase our graduates. So, all these statistics that talk about that we create the majority of dentists, Black veterinarians, educators, doctors, pharmacists, it goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But let's showcase those people. It's power in those numbers, but there's also power in those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys have been an absolute delight and joy. And I love the messages and how you were able to really affirm the special sauce that happens at our spaces and places. It would be wonderful to work with both of you. I can only imagine that there's never a dull moment, and it's bubbly and bright and ready, ripe for individuals to learn and be their best selves in the environments that you're leading in. So I thank you for leading at our nation's gyms, as I like to refer to them. Want to give you an opportunity to brag different, to shout out your spaces and places. And we'll start with the Mecca, if you like. Just a closing tagline or whatever you want to. The floor is yours. Or say whatever you like to about dear old Howard.
Earl Howard.
Yes.
Um, I really take pride in working at Howard, and when it's described as the Mecca, I know exactly what they mean. So when I talk to students about the Howard experience, I tell them it's hard for me to put it in words. You have to feel it. And when you are on campus, you can't feel it. And when I hear my students talk about the programs, when we have them on panels, et cetera, I am so proud of them. And then that makes me so proud of our faculty, because what they're saying is the result of what our faculty have done. And I will also say for our students, while they graduate as change agents, they already come very passionate to us. We help to provide them the tools to turn that passion and ingenuity into an action plan, to
Hmm.
a business plan, if you will, to implement throughout the community. So I'm very proud to be a part of the Howard Bison family, but I also know that I got my start as an Aggie that started this love of working within a setting that is around Black people.
I'm about to put you on the spot. Who's the greatest homecoming on earth? Who?
Oh, that's
You don't have to answer.
No,
I just thought I'd start some trouble.
I just said the only HBCU in the country that rivals the alumni homecoming is that Aggie Pride. I said,
It's a beast.
it's FAMU Rattlers, North Carolina Aggies. This is
Let me tell you something. I went to Little Old Edward Waters College, and our homecoming is live, but I have been to the Greatest Show. I have been to Howard, and I've been to the Classic between Bethune
yeah.
and FAMU, and that's not homecoming, but I've been down to Bragg Stadium. Like, I don't know how people do it. I mean, you need a vacation after
Oh,
coming from those homecoming experiences. But it's only right in a lot of ways, right? Because you're excellent all year long. You may as well be excellent while you're partying as
I
well,
just
right?
put my orange and green hair down. That's what.
That's right. That's right. Well, I wish Godspeed to both of you. I'm happy that I've had an opportunity to meet with you and to share with you. And boy, is the future bright for scholars coming through at FAMU, the School of Education, and as well at Howard University. I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Williams, for taking time out of your schedule as well. Allison, uh, Dr. Howard as well. I'm so grateful to have both of you here, and want you to know here at the Higher Education Leadership Foundation that we can be of help in any way, form, shape, or fashion. Consider us a part of your tribe, and we're just grateful for you to share with us today. So this has been real. This has been fun, but I know you have a million other things that you need to be doing. And so we're going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you
We
both.
appreciate
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I'll make sure I send an email with my information. I got to get that quote, Dr. Williams. I got to get that quote from you.
I will send it to you.
That gave me life.
Awesome.
All right, Dr. Watson, you all be well.
All
Okay.
right.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.